Welcome everybody to London Vegans. We have been going for many years, particularly online since 2020. And for most Wednesdays, first Wednesday of each month, we have our guest speaker evening. So thank you for attending this evening. And it's my great pleasure to introduce our guest speaker for this evening, and that's Sarah Bentley. And Sarah, I'm just going to read a little bit of a bio, very short. She's going to be telling you more about herself in a moment's time. So Sarah's an author, a podcast host, a campaigner, and a keynote speaker. She founded the vegan community cookery school Made in Hackney, which I'm sure she's going to be telling you more about in a moment's time. Although she no longer works at the helm of that organisation, she's an ambassador for them. And she's an author of their cookbook, which you can sort of see behind, but it's also in bigger image, which is called We Cook Plants. It's not just a cookbook. I'm sure she'll tell you about what's in there, as well as obviously various recipes in there. And there's over 100 recipes. And there's discussions about sustainability, etc. She now spends her time educating her son, homeschooling her son, teaching special education needs students food growing, and working part-time as campaigns manager at Plant-Based Health Professionals, which many of us already know about. She's managing the Plants First initiative there, which supports healthcare settings to adopt a plant-rich culture. Food culture. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Sarah. Any questions, please do save them towards the end. You can either send them in as a message to me, or you can raise your hands at the end of the meeting. Thank you, Sarah, for joining us this evening.
Such a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for joining. It's like a real honour to speak to you tonight. As Brian said, my name's Sarah, and most people in the vegan world know me as the founder of Made in Hackney. I actually had a little job promotion since that bio was written, and I'm now, it sounds very grand, the Director of Food and Culture at Plant-Based Health Professionals, which kind of suits me more than campaign manager. Tonight, I am going to focus on the Made in Hackney story. I am a proud ambassador for the charity still, even though I'm not at the helm. And I'm actually going to do something a little different with this talk. So let's see how it goes. The beginning we'll play the video, Made in Hackney's video, which is the best way of giving an introduction to the organisation in a short space of time. And you get to see lovely clips from the cookery classes and the work we do. I'll then talk a little bit about the book. But then after that, I'm actually going to share the 5 most challenging experiences I've ever had while at Made in Hackney. The things that nearly broke me and nearly broke the organisation, but didn't. Because sometimes I think when you do talks, you can spend so much time talking about what's gone well and what you've done well. It can feel a bit unrelatable when actually most of the grit and grind of making a community organisation happen is how you respond when you are tackling the challenges, when things go wrong, and when your back's against the wall. So I'm actually going to share what some of the 5 biggest challenges this evening. But before we get on to that, it would be fantastic if, Brian, you could play the video so people can have a little introduction to Made in Hackney and our work.
Just bear with me a second. And hopefully this will work.
Welcome to Made in Hackney!
Our mission is to tackle health inequalities, food access, the climate crisis, and bring communities together using the power of plants.
So how do we do all that?
Since 2012, our plant-based community cookery school has delivered over 4,000 joyful classes to people in London and beyond.
Inspiring more people to cook, grow and eat more plants.
Amazing things happen in these sessions.
People learn to cook from scratch, create life-changing eating habits, learn new cultural cuisines,
make friends,
and gain the vital skills to nourish themselves and their families.
Kids learn to cook, eat and enjoy vegetables.
Since being diagnosed as diabetic and changing my diet, my sugar levels have come down, which is amazing, in the space of 3 weeks.
I come from a very meat-heavy family, so I have not really eaten that many vegan recipes, so I'm glad to find out that it does taste nice.
And what else do we do?
We hold regular community feasts to share joy, build bridges and celebrate different cultural cuisines.
Each week, the community comes together to cook hundreds of nutritious multicultural meals.
Participants take these meals home to nourish themselves for the week.
And the rest are delivered by cycle couriers to food banks and people's homes.
It's very difficult for me to cook anything because I'm blind.
I'm elderly and disabled, so I just appreciate very much what they're doing.
Our name might be Made in Hackney, but what we do reaches so much further.
Our Plant Prospects programme works nationally, inspiring universities and schools, caterers, hospitals, businesses and community groups to go more plant-based.
This program is epic,
as it leads to thousands more better tasting plant-based meals across the country. And we're now international.
You can tune into our online classes everywhere in the world.
We have a global programme where we're sharing our learnings from the last decade.
We're not just a cookery school.
We're part of a movement.
Join us.
Join us. Get involved.
Support us today.
Thank you so much, Brian, for sharing the video. So I hope that gives like a sort of whistle-stop tour of Made in Hackney and all the different programs we do. As you can see, we built from just a small community cookery school in 2012 to something that was working nationally and then internationally. And I definitely never saw that coming when I started the project. I wouldn't have dreamt it would become that successful. And on that note, this is really my sort of final offering to the charity was this cookbook. And when I stepped down from the charity, and stepping down from something you founded and that is really your first baby is really, really hard. And it was probably one of the most difficult things I've done, leaving the day-to-day operations of Made in Hackney. But I said to everyone, when I leave, I will get as a cookbook deal and I'll do as a cookbook. And everyone was like, yeah. And I was like, no, I will. And so within a few months of leaving, I got as an agent and we got a publishing deal and we put this book out. And it's a real celebration of community, of food justice, of hope, and really of the power of love and connection and empathy and the incredible things that you can achieve as a community when you come together through something as beautiful as food and share time with each other and share space. There's loads of practical tips in here for how to be a better food citizen. There's loads of advice and tips on different issues. Things like cultural appropriation versus appreciation, how to decolonize the food system. I mean, that could be 10 books. So it's like an introduction to juicier topics all around food justice. Every recipe, of course, is vegan, but we tend to use the word plant-based, not because I'm not a proud vegan. I'm a very proud vegan. I went vegan when I was 19, having been vegetarian when I was 9. But we found when we used the word plant-based back in 2012, people just were more willing and more open-minded to try the food and didn't feel like we were trying to force an agenda on them. But we've only ever had a vegan food policy and it would never be anything else. So there's 100 international recipes in here. So you can get this book for the politics, for the chat, for the essays, or for the recipes. There's also a really amazing chapter called Thrive on Plants, which I co-wrote with plant-based health professionals. And that was before I got my new job. So it's a lovely sort of linking up of my old life and my new life in this book. But the Thrive on Plants chapter is really digestible 12-point plan for the things that we need to do. And I've been vegan for decades and I still need to remind myself of these things in order to thrive and stay well on a plant-based diet. So that's the part of the talk that's kind of more traditional and a lot of it feels like kind of like showing off. But I'm going to play our presentation now, and after that, I will begin to share some of the biggest challenges the organisation went through. So let me fire up my presentation. 1 second. Hold on. Obviously, there we go. Share. Bear with me. Here we go. Can everyone see that now?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm not going to talk to these photos. These are just images of Made in Hackney colour and life. So you can really get a flavour of the work we did, the communities we worked with, and the incredible people that have been part of this cooking school for the last 13 years. And I'm the lucky one that gets to talk about it a lot, but without everyone that came and joined in the classes, volunteered, offered their skills, their expertise, it would never have happened. So it really is a sort of homage to the thousands and thousands of people that believed in the mission of better food for everyone and compassionate food and got stuck in. And I was really moved by the amount of people whose lives the charity has touched over the years. So it wouldn't be right to do a presentation and just see me. You need to see all these incredible people as well. So these images will just roll as I talk. So some of the 5 biggest challenges of the organisation. I'm going to start with challenge 1, which was the kitchen build. So my former career was as a journalist, a social justice journalist. And prior to that, I was a music journalist, a reggae music journalist, which is interestingly where I discovered vegan food via the Ital food diet that Rastafarians eat. So that's a sort of a side story. So when I collaborated with another charity called AMA UK on a funding bid as a writer, I didn't realise at the time that that funding bid would eventually become Made in Hackney, and that would change my life. So when we were successful with this funding bid, they said to me, Sarah, you are going to run the organisation now. You're going to run the project. You're not just writing it and going. And I was like, oh, I don't know. I was actually planning on going on a little tour of the world and looking at food growing projects because it was really food growing that lit my fire. And they were like, well, we've got the money. You can't leave. And I was like, okay, cool, let's do it. I'll have a go at running this organisation. But it was a very steep learning curve. And the first thing was the kitchen build. I'd never run a build in my life, and I'm not the most practical of people. But anyway, we employed a builder, we did the usual things, we checked his references, put the job out to tender and everything. And we got this sort of £60,000 budget from the big lottery to turn a disused basement underneath the Food for All health food shop into a beautiful, functioning community kitchen. I spent loads of time designing it with a beautiful company called from Yorkshire called Milestone Kitchens, who made kitchens out of melted down coffee cups, like what you get out of vending machines, and other recycled materials from catering. So I was very excited about the kitchen, how it was going to look. And this is actually the original kitchen this photo was taken in. So the build started, and me being me trusted that the builders would do what they told us they would do. They would build the kitchen. And I went in a few weeks after they started and nothing really much had seemed to have happened. So I followed up. Yeah, this is a problem, that's a problem, but it's all in hand now, don't worry. A couple of weeks later, someone rings me. Sarah, the builders seem to spend a lot of time sitting on their bums drinking. And I was like, okay, this is a bit of a problem. So went in, followed up, and the builder we had employed said, yeah, I've had an issue with those builders. I'm going to fire them and get new ones in. Okay, so alarm bells starting to ring here. Now, this guy we were dealing with was very slick. He was a project manager and he did all the right talk and all the right patter. He'd employed a PR to promote this fantastic eco-community kitchen and cookery school he was working with. And we were having meetings with the PR. But at the same time, the kitchen just wasn't happening. It was like an empty basement still. And the money was being spent. And so we were like, okay, what's going on here? So more meetings, what's happening? And more waffle, a lot of slick talk. Oh yeah, this will happen, Sarah, don't worry, that'll happen. And I was just really trusting and was like, okay, maybe a lot of it's happening that I can't really see. Maybe it's like, I just believed him. And so we get to 2 weeks before the deadline, and I'm like, okay, Ian, this is a disaster. Where is this? Where is that? Where is the other? And he still wouldn't admit that there was a problem. You know, those people that you encounter where they're just completely blindsided and they just won't actually acknowledge there's an issue. So I knew, so alarm bells were going off here. And so I left a message with one of my founder colleagues to say, don't release the last of the money because something is amiss here. The work is not being done, something's dodgy going on. She never got that message. And she was away at the time. And Tanya's like, go ahead in her hands. It's like, and so she released the last payment to the builder before it had been finished. He then left a note I will never forget, in a card. And the card said, good luck on it. He couldn't make it up. And in the card, it said, kitchen nearly finished, but run out of budget. I've left some grouting solution in the cupboard and a tin of paint. Good luck. And the name. I was obviously gobsmacked because at this point we didn't have any units erected. We didn't have any hobs wired in. We didn't have any tiling done. We had no doors, never mind handles on the doors. We had no carpentry, shelving, this type of thing. It was basically an empty shell. So this was pretty horrific because this is the first time I'd ever got money in from, say, Big Lottery. And, you know, if you can't deliver, you've spent that money and you haven't achieved your kitchen. So you're held responsible for that. So stress levels through the roof, absolutely melting down. My co-founder who gave him the money was distraught, couldn't believe she didn't get the message, couldn't believe she'd done that. So what happened next? I went into firefighting mode, told the PR what had happened. She was very distressed, stopped working with him. Then he was exhibiting at a kitchen conference in Birmingham, and I got in touch with them saying, you've got a rogue trader there. He's a dodgy builder. You shouldn't have him exhibiting. And then he sent me a text message that threatened my personal safety if I continued to pursue him in this manner. And that if I was to do anything legally, I should do my worst, lassie. And the phrase, do your worst, lassie, has stayed with me. This is 13 years ago, and I was just like, oh. But anyway, I couldn't focus too much attention on trying to bring him down because I had a community kitchen to finish. So what happened next was exhausting, but it was really quite beautiful. So my husband is a very practical man. And the builder, I keep trying not to name him, but it doesn't really matter because he's actually passed away since. But he had employed some electricians and some other work people, and I showed them the note, and they were all gobsmacked, and they were like, "I don't know what's going on, but we're going to stay and we're going to keep doing this work for you, and we've no idea if we're going to get paid." So the electrician stayed, carried on doing some wiring. One of the builders doing the kitchen realised he was in above his head and he couldn't really do it, so he left. I called the creators of the kitchen from York who make these recycled kitchens, and they were like the cavalry. They left their house at 4 a.m. one day in Yorkshire, came charging down and went about fitting their kitchen units in a way that they were proud of, that they wanted the community to use. It was really beautiful to see them in action. Then we mobilised a team of local volunteers from the health food shop and from the nursery next door. That involved me standing on the street with a clipboard, begging parents picking up their children. Do you have any carpentry skills? Are you a plumber? Are you practical? Would you like to come down to the basement and have a look at this? And basically, just through this sort of outreach, we spent the next 3 weeks finishing the kitchen as a community. We had people doing angle grinding. I learnt to grow up tiles. We had some 12-year-olds come with their parents, help do stuff. We had a local builder come and do some carpentry. It really was, in the truest sense of the word, a community kitchen. And we opened the kitchen 2 weeks late, but only 2 weeks late. And we already had a community of, I think, probably over 50 people that helped make that kitchen happen. And so although it nearly sort of put me in my box, the stress, it did kind of show me from the beginning the incredible power of community and how much local people, if you explain what it's for and what the motivation is, they will give their time, they will give their energy, and they will give their love to make something wonderful happen. So as unpleasant as that first experience was, I think it really set me up for the next sort of 13 years that were to come. Because of course there was a lot of successes, but there was challenge after challenge after challenge. One of the funniest things about the build, which I realized a few days after the builder had left, there was like a pile of paint tins. And so that it didn't look that bad before he left, he'd done a quick once over with a roller and he'd gone around the outline of the paint tins. So when you moved these away, there was like a big gap, like a sort of body where they'd been. So he hadn't even painted properly. So this picture that you're looking at now is the picture that the community installed. The doors, the skirting, the units, everything that you see there was done by the local community, which was a really beautiful and a testament to what can be achieved. So we got up and running. Challenge 1, surely nothing else is going to happen, right? We've surmounted this huge hurdle. We did our first lesson, which was a chutney and jam making class. It was packed. It was a huge success. I was delighted. And then our first course started, which was with a group of Irish elders, none of them vegetarian or plant-based, yet they stayed for 6 weeks because, as I believed, they had a great time. They enjoyed trying new food. They enjoyed making new friends. And if we held the space with love and compassion, they wouldn't mind that the food was all vegan. They would actually be open to it and they would take it on board. And that's exactly what happened. And then we rolled out that formula again and again and again for other classes. But before we got to that, so all the original staff I employed, it was very minimal. It was myself, a finance officer working 1 day a week, an amazing volunteer, a project apprentice who was going to work with me 2 days a week because they were in between careers, and a teacher, a lead cookery teacher. And they were going to do the main cooking provision. So I'd never done a recruitment round before, so it was a big learning experience. I'd advertised the jobs, interviewed lots of people, sorted out the contracts, employed them, trained them, done the inductions, did everything. And within 3 weeks, all 3 of them had left. Now, at this point, you think, is it me? Oh my goodness, is it me? But sadly, it was just a sequence of events. You know, one of them had a health crisis and had to leave. One of them said they really only wanted to be a bookkeeper. They didn't want to be the founding person of a finance department. They felt like it was a bit too much for them. So they left, and someone else was offered a job paying loads and loads of money. So they had to leave. So we had to start all over again. But because I was new to this and I was terrified of not delivering to the big lottery what I said I was going to deliver, I had to deliver all the cooking classes, all the courses, do the finances, do the admin. And I basically did every single role for about a month, maybe 6 weeks, while we recruited new people. Now, anyone who's run their own business, which I suppose might be many people on this call, will tell you having done all the roles of your business is really vital, actually, for understanding how it works, what people need, what resources they need, and how they're going to do their job well. So as unpleasant as it was for me, it probably really did me good to have to do those roles. After that, every single person we employed at Made in Hackney stayed for at least 8 years. And it became a running joke that once you join, you never really leave. And even people who left would volunteer, they'd join the board, they'd teach some classes. So it became this sort of running joke that you never really left Made in Hackney. It was like a family. So we went from one extreme to the other, but it was very encouraging that it wasn't me. People really were actually leaving for genuine reasons at the beginning. So back in 2012, plant-based vegan eating was viewed with quite a lot of skepticism, shall we say. There wasn't much information out there that was positive about plant-based and vegan eating, and there was definitely a lot of people thinking it was some sort of strange, weird cult, right? But largely we got over this by just promoting the benefits of plant-based eating. So we'd say it's low cost, it's really good for food hygiene, for children cooking, it's multicultural and inclusive, it's sustainable. So we'd lead with promoting all the benefits of the diet and then let the food do the talking. So we had a group of young people in who were all in care and also were not in education, in formal education. So a group of young people who'd mainly been kicked out of school and were also in care. So quite vulnerable young people with high needs. And they were with us for a 6-week cooking course. And they're very honest. If they don't like the food or that they want meat or whatever, they're going to tell us. But we'd done this whole first lesson with them where they'd got to know the teacher, they'd got to know the ingredients, they'd had a good time. And I was thinking, we're really winning here. This is fantastic. They'd made chili non carne with a kind of soya mince and lentils with a salad and brown rice. They were all eating it. Such a success. And then, of course, as they were leaving, there was 2 people with them, 2 adults accompanying them. And one of them said, I'm a dietitian and I'm extremely concerned about the food that's been cooked in this class. And I'm going to hand out a more appropriate lunch. So after eating their brown rice, their lentils and all of this, they handed out ham sandwiches, packets of crisps and chocolate bars.
Oh dear.
And to each of the young people who also looked confused because they were like, I've just eaten my lunch. My jaw must have been on the ground at this point, but this is one of our clients and the client is kind of always right, even when they're wrong. So I was like, oh, that's really interesting. As you're leaving now, perhaps it's not the right moment, but I'd be so delighted to talk to you about the nutritional profile of the meal. I could introduce you to one of our plant-based nutritionists if you've got any concern, and just tried to like paper it up and smooth it over as best I could. But she was aghast, she was horrified, and out these ham sandwiches were going. She actually tried to get the group stopped from coming altogether, but thankfully someone else within her organisation overrode it and signed it off, and that person just stopped coming. But again, these kind of challenges, they give you answers. They prepare you for dealing with different people and they prepare you for pushback. So although they're very uncomfortable at the time, they all sort of help you be a better project and be a better community leader. So on a similar note, we offered our services to Homerton NHS diabetic department. And to begin that relationship, I was invited to attend one of their courses, which at the time was called Expert. And so I attended the course along with many other people suffering from type 2 diabetes. And the first section of the course was held at the hospital and was very fascinating and interesting about how diabetes works. Lots of diagrams, things that you hold, looking at your arteries, this, that, really fascinating. The second part of the course they did in a supermarket, and it was a food tour led by a diabetic dietitian. Now, I don't think they do this anymore. This is like back in 2013. But they took us on this tour of the supermarket. And their whole approach was to tell people what they couldn't eat. So it was an hour and a half of being told what you cannot eat. It was the most miserable hour and a half of my life. I started feeling in a bad mood. You're in a really bad mood by the end of it. And they were like, okay, so this is that, you can't eat any of those. Looking at these sweets and this, you can't eat any of those. They swished through the vegetable department going, you could have any of this if you like. Just walked through it. It was wild. It was like everything you shouldn't do to inspire people to change their habits and their lifestyle. And in that moment, in that course, where I could see how miserable people were looking, and by the end of it, everyone just wanted to eat a whole packet of biscuits and like all the naughty food because you just felt so depressed. I thought, this is so wrong. You get people to evolve their diets and change their diets by creating joyful, meaningful experiences and connection with other people that are about sharing and joy and laughter and delicious food. And that is the opposite of this talk, which was given with the greatest of intentions, but it really just said to me, okay, what we're doing at Made in Hackney, this is so needed, because if this is the alternative where you're just told what you can't eat, who is going to show people what they can eat in a way that's delicious and exciting and appealing? So after this talk, I obviously didn't give blunt feedback, because you have to sort of, when you're wooing an NHS partner, you have to be careful. But I invited the people working with people with type 2 diabetes to come to the kitchen, experience one of our classes, and could you then refer patients to us? So in they came, and they enjoyed the class, it looked like, and they participated in the class, and then they left. A few weeks later, I got back in touch with them. So what did you think of the class? Will you refer patients to us? And I received an email about this long that was, we were extreme, we were irresponsible, we were exclusive, I did just everything you could possibly imagine. And I was like, okay, all right, a little bit of work to do here. But I was really polite. I said, oh, happy to talk about this, just really trying to keep the fire burning. I didn't want the bridge to be burnt by that one experience, because it's like when you're changing food culture, you've really got to be in it for the long run. And people have so much resistance to change because of their culture, their training. And in those health professionals' defense, their training wouldn't have included plant-based diets and plant-based nutrition. So it made them feel nervous, because if they don't know anything about it, you can't really recommend it and feel like you're doing your professional due diligence. But they weren't really big enough to say that is probably what was going on. So we didn't get any referrals for type 2 diabetes patients, but I kept every year sending them an email, inviting them to classes, sending them recipes. And after about 4 years, we started to get our first referrals coming through, where they would tell us, oh yeah, I got sent your class poster by my support dietitian from the diabetics department. And I was like, whoa, because they never told us they were going to do it, but someone there was starting to pay attention to us and was starting to refer our people to our program. Fast forward another few years, we partnered with the Homerton Diabetes Department and actually did some joint funding bids and led, in collaboration with them, Cooking for Type 2 Diabetes courses, which was amazing. And for me, it was like the biggest win, but we had to grind and chip away for years and years and years to get that to happen. But it really showed me the power of persistence, staying open and compassionate. Like, instead of me just blowing my rag and saying, that's really rude, you don't know what you're talking about, just staying curious, like, oh, I wonder why they're pushing back so much. I wonder why they're not open to this, just constantly asking why and trying to stay polite and open, that in the end, they became one of our regular partners, which I was so proud about. And then we also developed courses for people with type 2 diabetes from specific ethnic groups. So we would run a course, West African cuisine for people with type 2 diabetes. We ran courses of Southeast Asian heritage with type 2 diabetes, so that the food and the teacher could be culturally appropriate. And that kind of service hasn't been offered by anyone else, really. And people come to us again and again saying, those classes that you offer us completely changed my life. I was being shown a type of diet that was very Eurocentric, so I couldn't make the changes that I needed to make to manage my diabetes. But when I came on these courses, suddenly I felt like, aha, the food is speaking to me. I can make these changes because they represent my cultural cuisine. So those were a big, big win. So what was the next challenge? Well, there were millions, but something that really sticks in my mind and still makes me cringe to this day when I think about it. I kind of go, oh, it just makes me want to climb under the table and hide. We had a booking from a wonderful lady called Nikki Clinch, quite a diva, quite an Instagrammer, and she did macrobiotic cooking classes. And when you're running a small charity, any kind of client, hiring your space is so valuable, because you need to constantly be bringing in money to cover your staff costs, the ingredients costs, your overhead costs. So making sure your clients are happy is so important. And so we booked the kitchen for Nikki Clinch. Here she was coming to deliver her macrobiotic classes. Now, she charged quite a lot of money for her classes, so it attracted a different type of clientele altogether, who expected a certain level of finesse, professionalism, etc. But what had I done? I had booked on the same night, at the same time, a community cookery class for Idle Cookery with a gentleman called Jar Spirit. And he was a Rastafarian elder, one of our wonderful class teachers who stayed with us for many years. He's sadly now passed away. You saw a picture of him earlier. And his class was booked for exactly that time. And I was in the library working away, and I got this call from Nikki Clinch. And at the same time, I could see another call coming through from him. And in that moment, my heart just exploded. And I was like, oh, there's 2 classes booked to go on at once, both fully booked. Her class was fully booked and his community class was fully booked. It's like, what do I do? And I didn't, for the first few minutes, I didn't answer the phone. I just completely blanked out, was like, and I'm trying to think through, what can I do? What can I do to resolve this? So I had a few minutes, took a few minutes to myself and thought, okay, one of them has to be cancelled. It probably has to be the community class. That's really sad, but people haven't spent money. We'll have to apologise profusely, apologise to the participants. That will be it. But interestingly, in that time, which I took for myself to gather my thoughts, about 5 minutes, they'd come up with a solution themselves. And the yoga centre positioned above the community cookery school, who we knew very well, one of them happened to be leaving at the same time as this sort of fracas was going on outside, where everyone made it clear they were expecting to set up their class. And they had offered their space and their kitchen in the yoga centre for the community cookery class to take place in and the professional class to go on downstairs. Now, this is a bit of a wild solution because obviously when you're doing community cookery classes, they're all risk assessed, they're all planned, all the equipment is a certain way, everything's pat tested. So just sort of boldly going into another space and delivering a community cookery class, if they'd asked me, I'd have probably said no. But by the time I got in touch with them, they were like, this is happening, we're setting it all up, it's fine, it's happening, we'll do the class upstairs. So that was another amazing thing for me because I learned I don't need to solve everything. Just because you start something and you've found something, it doesn't mean that the community, the staff, the people involved will not problem solve themselves. And so that was a really big learning for me. And the feedback we got from the community class that it was a bit unusual, but it was fun and they understood that people were working in a different setup and people enjoyed it very much. Feedback from the higher client, a bit less kind, but they did get to run their class. So they sort of sucked up that I'd made a mistake in the end. I didn't make a calendar error after that, but I did get someone to check the calendar entries thereon in. I've since been diagnosed with ADHD, and I know that doing like digital calendar entries, I find that quite challenging, and I can easily get that wrong if I do it fast. So just having someone to check over my work was really important. So that was one of the other challenges.
Just say so. Your slides came to an end, so that if you want to stop those,
we can stop those and we could just reshare them from the beginning.
Yeah, if you want to do that. And nice. It's about 20 to 8 at the moment. If you want another 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just try and redo the. Do you want? I can just do it without the slides. I think
that's okay.
So then the last thing that I wanted to cover was the pandemic. Now, obviously, we're a community cookery school. As you can see from the pictures, everything we do is about in-person connection. It's about cooking together, sharing food, and being with each other. So when the pandemic was emerging, before we had any actual instructions from the government, it became very clear to me that we were going to have to shut the cookery school. And if you shut the cookery school, how are you going to meet the requirements of your grant funders? How are you going to serve your community? And this was a terrifying thought because we'd built the community school up for 8 years at that point. We had classes every week that were full. We had master classes that were full. We had contracts from Public Health Hackney that we were doing. We really had the wind in our sails. And suddenly it became very clear that it would be irresponsible to stay open. Now, I lost a good few nights' sleep thinking, how will we survive? How will the charity survive? This was before furlough, before any of those solutions kicked in. And so we called a meeting together as a team and we said, what do we do? How are we going to surmount this and survive and not lose the cooking school? And some people had solutions that I kind of call non-solutions. Cuts. Let's do loads of cuts. Let's see what we can cut, strim from the budget, like austerity, until we, are left with hardly any costs and see if we can survive that way. Now, I knew this was much bigger than cuts. If we were going to survive, and not just survive, but continue to serve the community and to be a valuable resource to the community, we were going to need to do something totally different. So I called a meeting with the team members in person and said, I really think this will be our last in-person meeting for a long time. I really think we'll eventually go into lockdown, but we need to decide together what we're going to do. But I could see no one was in the frame of mind to do that because they hadn't caught up. They were still planning their projects, planning their community parties, planning their courses. And so we had what I called a letting go ceremony, where we stood in a circle and we talked about all the projects and things we were dreaming about and wanted to do that we were going to have to pause or not do. And we went round in a circle and we listened to each other. And we also said, talk about your family or any concerns. And we shared all the things we were sad about having to put down, say goodbye to, and not be able to do. And once we'd done that and the dust settled, I said, okay, I think we're all on the same page now. We're going to have to do something completely different. And from that mindset, we were able to look at what the community most needed at that time. And people were already ringing us and saying that they were locked in at home, they were terrified to go out, they couldn't get food, they'd lost their job, the people working hand to mouth, getting cash, paid jobs weren't working, and they needed help. So we were like, okay, let's deliver meals to people's doors. It's not what we do, we're not caterers, but let's do that. And once we decided that, the whole team swang into gear. And we did a crowdfunder campaign that was the first crowdfunder campaign in the whole of the UK for a pandemic response. And we raised 30 grand in the first 48 hours, purely because I think we were first out the door with the response. We were first to start talking about that. And in a matter of 2 weeks, we built this huge database of people locally who would need food support and a referral form. And we'd partnered with a local restaurant called Angelina's, and they were going to cook the food and they would take care of all the food. We would manage all the logistics, all the cycle delivery and all the drop-offs to vulnerable people. And we would train our volunteers in, spotting domestic violence and abuse and child neglect, etc. And we would become a frontline service delivering food. And we planned all of that, fundraised for that and launched the service in under 3 weeks from having that initial meeting right through to the first meals being delivered. And I'll never forget the first day of the service. The whole of Hackney was empty. I was cycling around on my bike. It was nothing. There was no one out. And then you got to Angelina's restaurant in London and queued up outside, spaced out with 2 meters between each other, were 50 cycle couriers wearing Made in Hackney high-vis jackets, ready and waiting to deliver plant-based meals to the community. And I just thought, wow, real people can do anything. The government hasn't done this, the council hasn't done this, we've done this. And all the volunteers have done this. And it's a feeling that I sort of never forgot after that. And it was like, what was a problem? What was a challenge? You can often turn into something really beautiful. And to this day, I think the Made in Hackney pandemic response has probably one of the most important things I've ever done in my life. And we went on to provide over 300,000 meals over a 2.5 year period. And that programme Made in Hackney still do now, but on a much smaller scale, a programme called Community Made, where meals are cooked and delivered to a few hundred residents every week. So I'll wrap up from there. There's so many other challenges I could have shared, but hopefully that was just a slightly more interesting way of learning about Made in Hackney than just me rattling off the same story. But if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them, or any chat, I'd be really happy.
Thanks, that was absolutely fascinating stories. I'm amazing what challenges you've gone through.
So many more.
I understand. I didn't know. My partner Julie's been to the cookery class, but I think you moved. There's a move location. Is that right?
Yes. So we're now. I see a few people have got hands up, which is great.
Yeah.
We've now moved location to a really beautiful cooking school in Clapton Commons in North Hackney, quite near Stamford Hill. It's a black and white building next to the Commons. It's really lovely. So you no longer have to navigate stairs, thankfully, to get into the cooking school.
Richard, hi Richard.
Hi, I came on late. I had a busy day. I fell asleep. I came
Hi,
on at 24. Hello, I fell asleep. I came on at 7:24.
I think I met you at the Vegan Society birthday party at the Commons.
Yes, I think so. Yes. I just put my application to register my project in to the Charity Commission yesterday.
Oh, amazing! Congratulations.
Yes, I've got my fingers crossed.
Do you have a question, Richard?
Yes. You mentioned about diabetes a lot. I've got type 2 diabetes. And my former GP was vegetarian or vegan. I think he was vegetarian to start with, anyway, vegan. And he always used to say that my veganism was helping a great deal in keeping my blood sugar levels low. Are you guys still doing work with diabetics?
Yes. So I don't know when the next set of courses are, but there will always be specific courses for diabetics. But actually, when you look at most of our programme, nearly all of it is suitable. Perhaps not the baking, but nearly everything else is suitable and can be adapted. So if you say to the teacher, I've got type 2 diabetes, they're all experienced enough to make adaptations. But to be honest, all the classes are very health focused, because we have people turning up with all sorts of conditions, diabetes, hypertension, etc. So we need to make sure the meals are as health supporting as possible. So yes, there will be more courses specifically for people with type 2 diabetes, but most of the classes you'll find will be suitable.
Okay, I'll be finding out how to get there. I'll make a trip up there and see how it goes.
Yeah, have a look at the website. You can see all the class listings, and then you book on.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Good question. Thanks for that. Hi, John. Do you want to unmute yourself?
You're muted.
Yeah, great. Got it. Yeah. Yes, two things, if I may. One is at the beginning, you said that you become, I think, said international. I was just wondering what you meant by that. And the other thing is, are there any other similar organisations to Made in Hackney? Anywhere else, either in London or that you've heard of anywhere in the world?
Great question. And I can answer both of them together, because we started a programme called Global Plant Kitchens, and there's a separate website called Global Plant Kitchens. And on it is a course about how to set up your own plant-based community cookery school. And there's like a whole syllabus on there: marketing, recipes, fundraising, you name it. Everything we've learned, we poured into a course. So the idea being to accelerate a movement of plant-based community cookery schools, and to stop people having to make all the mistakes we made, which there were many, about 1,000 more than what you've experienced on this call, so many more. So we wanted to sort of, share what we've learned. So that program's called Global Plant-Based Kitchens, and we've had sign-ups to that from over 18 different countries. 18 different countries. And we've mentored people from Macau, Berlin, America, Peru, which is amazing. So that's the international element. There was two parts of the question. Why is it international? And other cooking schools. So Yes, in the UK, we mentored an organisation that are now in Manchester called Greens and Others. So that teacher, Mel, started with us. She moved to Manchester and we supported her to set up there. There's another organisation called Joyful Greens. And there's Nishma that's on the call now with Shambu Catering and her community cooking classes. There's a small movement of cooking schools all across the UK, but they're all quite like struggling to get funding and to get their foot in the door. But they do exist. And the most exciting is probably the ones in Peru, because they have this huge network of community kitchens that's part of their indigenous culture. And whenever there's an emergency, or even just at the weekend, these community kitchens pop up and feed their community. And they send a little text message out to everyone living nearby, and people turn up with their Tupperware and get their food. And we've been working with a group who are supporting them to veganize their offering. So that's really useful. If you're living in a high altitude community, climbing down a ladder to get your food from the market, having to buy meat, fresh meat, when you've got no refrigeration is not very practical. But if you can take dried soya chunks and textured soya protein home with you, that can stay up with you for months and months on end. And so they're actually really enjoying the protein swaps. And so we've been working with an organisation supporting them with that. So there's a bit of information about that in We Cook Plants about the Peru cooking schools.
Thanks, John. Well done to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Nishma Merge. Let me actually, if I had a spotlight, you can see you. Hi.
Oh, you've got your book behind you. I love it.
Good. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Firstly, excellent talk, Sarah. Really inspiring, and
Filling the beans.
Didn't realise you've gone through so many challenges, and hats off to you and congratulations for overcoming them in the way you did. I mean, it's brilliant. I was just curious, your new role at Plant-Based Health Professionals. Is there anything you can share about that?
Yes. I have to be a little bit careful because we haven't officially announced some of our work, but I can tell you about some of it. So we've formed a first of its kind coalition called the Plants First Healthcare Coalition with 5 other organisations: ProVeg, My NutriWeb, Real Zero and Greener by Default. And as a collection of organisations, we're supporting healthcare settings, mainly the NHS, to adopt more plant-rich menus and food cultures. But this involves a lot of very sensitive work because there was a huge amount of pushback last year where they thought that this work was about veganizing the whole menu as opposed to just putting more plants on plates, putting more plant-based options on menus and normalizing eating vegan meals for everyone. And if you decide to go the full 100, that's wonderful. But if you don't, you don't. But their offering, the NHS plant-rich offering, most of us will know is really not very good. So it's really about getting people to open up and accept us, that we can support them to do better. And we're doing things like menu placement, choice architecture, recipe development, training with dietitians, training with chefs, and most importantly, training with service staff. Because if you do all this great work renaming the dishes, calling them roasted Mediterranean vegetable lasagna instead of the vegan lasagna, which no one's ordering unless you're vegan. So if you do all this great work, but then the serving member goes, vegan lasagna, and slops it on your plate, you're like, it's all undone. So we're doing a lot of training, but in a very sensitive way, because we did get a lot of pushback last year when there was this idea that we wanted to turn all hospital menus vegan. Obviously, between me and you, we would love that, but that's not the sort of frontline offering. And also, you need to take people there gradually. You need to do it step by step. So yes, that's what I'm working on currently, but we haven't done an official announcement yet because we have a big event coming up in February with caterers and all the NHS leaders where we need to woo them and charm them. So wish us luck for that because I'm extremely nervous about it.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Yeah, good luck.
Thanks for that. Actually, whilst you're on there, I wanted to ask a question specifically about the book, which is, how do you decide when you've got all these people volunteering recipes, how do you decide which recipes to go in there? I don't know whether Nishma can tell us why she chose her particular recipe, but how did you decide? Got so many recipes.
I can answer why I chose those recipes. The recipes, the ingredients have to be very accessible, first of all, and also they have to be affordable, accessible, and easy to cook as well. So if I put any complicated recipes in there with hard to find ingredients, no one's going to cook that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
Yeah.
So that's how I chose my recipes, and they're all nutritious as well.
Yeah. And Sarah, for amongst all the ones you've got in there, any any,
any favourites? Nishma's, of course.
Yeah.
Now, what I also love about Nishma's recipe, though, is that it introduces people to ingredients they may not have known, but they are low cost and they are easy to work with. So you're learning something new, and especially please correct me if my pronunciation's wrong, the ugali?
Ugali, yeah.
Ugali. You know, for some people that's like, oh, that's very different, but it's actually very delicious. It's low cost. You can find it. And because we're a cooking school, we are all about teaching people new things, whether that's how to get more plants on your plate or a new international ingredient or where to shop. And we are about teaching skills. So this cookbook isn't all you can eat in 10 minutes or cooking with 3 ingredients. People think it might be, but we credit community members with having more ambition for their cooking than that, and to push people a bit further. So in our book you will learn lots of different skills and lots of things that will help you work with ingredients from scratch that will carry you through life to be a good cook. So yeah, you are learning stuff when you do our cookbook. There are some recipes that are quick meals, like under 30 minutes. There's recipes that are one pot, so there's a little logo to know that there's not going to have loads of washing up. And there's a little logo for pots and pans only, if you don't have a food processor or a blender. So we've added these icons to make sure they're accessible for everyone's lifestyle and kitchen setup. But we haven't never excluded a complicated recipe, because some people want that. Some people want a bit of a challenge. So there's something in it for everyone.
Also, can I say like food connects all cultures? So Sarah mentioned ugali, which is made out of cornmeal. So if you look at say South American dishes, they'll be made out of corn as well. So it's just like it will be the same concept. Like in West Africa, they'll have they have fufu made out of cassava, but the concept will be the same. And lots of people around the world will realize in Italy they have polenta, and so they'll see that there is a connection with food.
Absolutely. And there's even a little box out near Nishma's recipe, I think it is, called Eating with Your Hands. And it's and I interviewed Nishma about this, like the etiquette of eating with your hands, and how and why and this, that, and the other, because my husband's half Nigerian, so for him it's kind of eating fufu and stew with your hands is kind of normal. But I'm a white British woman with Irish ancestry. I've never eaten a stew with my hands in my life. So I needed a bit of encouragement. And so there's like little box outs explaining these things. And we also have like information about key ingredients, so like Scotch bonnet or plantain or Chinese 5-spice at the back of the book. So if it's new to you, you can go and read about it. But if it's not new to you, you can just cook through and keep going.
Yeah, I think the cultural aspect is another beautiful element of the book, and of course the Made in Hackney spirit in general. So I think that's great, the whole diversity aspect of
it's lovely, isn't it? Because everyone's learning together.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mersh. Thanks, Nishma. We're running out of time. I know Richard has one other question. Can you keep it quick, please, Richard?
I wanted to quickly say, you said you raised 30 grand on crowdfunding. I wanted to know what platform you used.
We used crowdfunder.co.uk. It's literally called crowdfunder.co.uk.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I prefer them to other platforms. If you're going to do a crowdfunder, wait till there's a match funding round, so that when someone donates a tenner, another organisation matches it with another tenner, because then you can double your money. So wait to start a crowdfunder until there's match funding available. And you can get in touch with the platforms and ask them, when is your next match funding round?
Okay.
That's the smart way to do it. We didn't always do that, obviously, because we learned the hard way.
We're going to bring the meeting to an end, a conclusion. I just say a really, really big thank you again to Sarah. It's been so fascinating listening to your story and inspiring as well about how Made in Hackney has developed and all the good work it's doing. I've mentioned many times about the cookery book. Their courses can be found on Made in Hackney. So there's courses for the community. There's also paid for courses as well. So please do visit their website. A big round of applause if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
I hope you guys can get the book and enjoy it, and the money goes back to Made in Hackney. But thank you so much for having me.
A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.